Joe Neguse, former House impeachment manager for the second impeachment of Donald Trump. Congressman Neguse, welcome back to the Sunday show. So I would love for you to pick up on this part of the conversation that we're having in terms of the political pressure on Attorney General Merrick Garland to formally say, hey, we're investigating and we're going down that road. I would love your views on this.
Yeah, well, good morning, Jonathan. Good to be with you. First, let me just say, underscoring a point that several of the prior panelists referenced earlier, I thought this week's hearing was incredibly powerful, compelling, meaningful, and I think the Select Committee did a masterful job of providing additional details to the American public at the granular level in terms of the president's culpability regarding the events of January 6th. Now, with respect to your particular question regarding the Attorney General, look, I think this Department of Justice, unlike the Department of Justice under the former president and former Attorney General Bill Barr, is insulated away from any kind of political influence. And I think that's important. I trust the career prosecutors at the Department of Justice to make the right decisions based on the facts and the law. And, you know, I think it's important probably for us to refrain from opining on that any further. Obviously, as you know, we had a trial in the Senate a year and a half ago that made very clear the president's culpability regarding the constitutional crime that he was charged with. And ultimately, there was a bipartisan vote in favor of conviction, insufficient under the Constitution in terms of the two-third requirement, but nonetheless, the most bipartisan vote for conviction in the history of presidential impeachments. Whether or not the president or other individuals committed federal crimes, those are decisions that the Department of Justice is going to have to make, and they need to make those free from any kind of political influence.
We're running a little bit out of time in this block, so we'll pick up the conversation in the next block. But Congresswoman Elaine Luria was on Morning Joe on Friday and said, quote, I hope Merrick Garland has an open criminal investigation into Donald Trump. The day before the hearing, the Attorney General said that the Justice Department does not run its investigations in the public eye, but added this.
We have to do two things. We have to hold accountable every person who is criminally responsible for trying to overturn a legitimate election, and we must do it in a way filled with integrity and professionalism, the way the Justice Department conducts investigations. Both of these are necessary in order to achieve justice and to protect our democracy.
Now, his comments come after a May memo he wrote was revealed on the Rachel Maddow show that restated a long-term policy discouraging the announcement of investigations or indictments of major political figures just ahead of an election. Joyce, given all of that, do you think charges are coming?
You know, that's the question that we're all puzzling over, and I suspect we'll only know the answer for certain if we wake up one morning to learn that the Justice Department has unsealed indictments. But I take Merrick Garland at his word. There's no reason not to. And since the speech he gave on January 5th of this year, he's repeatedly emphasized that he will follow the facts wherever they take him. That is a really, I think, heartening return to DOJ's principles. Frustrating for those of us in the public who have to wait and see. But we don't want to become a country that routinely goes after its former leaders. And although Donald Trump is richly deserving of the scrutiny that he's getting, we need to make sure that we adhere to the principles of the rule of law. It's a good sign that Merrick Garland is doing just that.
All right, we're going to keep this particular part of the conversation going when we come back after. My panel is back with me, and Neil, I'm going to come to you as we pick up this conversation about the political pressure on Attorney General Merrick Garland to announce an investigation or, you know, indictments, or as one person mentioned, folks are just eager to see Trump let out in handcuffs. But since Trump is not on the ballot, does this memo from the Attorney General reiterating the policy that there will be shouldn't be any announcements of indictments or anything before an election, does that apply to the midterms?
So I don't think, Jonathan, that that the Garland memo is anything but really, honestly, a nothing burger. I mean, what it says is basically that if there is going to be an investigation of high-level wrongdoing, and I think it applies to the midterms as well, but that it just means the Attorney General has to sign off on it. It can't just be some random prosecutor out in the field or something doing it. That's all. That doesn't strike me as particularly controversial or difficult. What I think the interesting question is, it's always framed as political pressure on Garland. I don't think Garland's going to give in one bit to political pressure, and this is where Merrick Garland's disposition and temperament really help him. It's obvious he doesn't want to be the first Attorney General in United States history to indict a former president. It's obvious he thinks that's generally what, third world dictators do and things like that. He's the opposite of a lock him up Attorney General. But I think the committee hearings have forced not political pressure, but just transparency. They've outlined for the American public what Donald Trump did. And it's so hard now for Merrick Garland to look the other way. That's why I think he's going to have to indict, even if he doesn't want to. And I have one minor disagreement with my friend Joyce. Joyce talked about how there was a major unknown about how Pat Simpoloni, the White House counsel, hadn't testified before the Justice Department. And she said, as a prosecutor, you've got to assume that's bad for the prosecution. And I've never been a prosecutor. Joyce has been an amazing prosecutor. So I'm on thin ice here, and I'll acknowledge that. But I do think this feels different to me because Pat Simpoloni is invoking executive privilege at Donald Trump's behest. If there's any thought that Simpoloni would be exculpatory or helpful to Donald Trump, they wouldn't be invoking executive privilege. So my assumption would be that Pat Simpoloni only has testimony that is going to be harmful to Trump. That's why he's afraid to go and tell the truth.
Joyce, would you like to respond? Any response?
I think Neil makes a great point, and the way I looked at Pat Simpoloni's testimony on videotape in this last hearing, he gave every appearance of someone who wanted to testify for the prosecution. You've got to nail that down, though, as a prosecutor. You don't want any surprises. And, of course, John Eastman and Jeffrey Clark, who wanted the job of Attorney General so badly that he was willing to pursue the big lie in order to get it, you've got to have those folks in front of a grand jury locked down before you indict.
Congressman Neguse, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the epic reporting by Axios' Jonathan Swan about how Donald Trump and Donald Trump world is using an executive order he signed when he was president, called Schedule F, I believe it's called, that has since been rescinded by President Biden. But the key thing here is that this Schedule F EO would make it possible for the president to fire about 50,000 career federal officials, career bureaucrats, in an effort to remake the government that's more loyal to him rather than the Constitution. Again, I don't know if you've had a chance to read all 12,000 words, but what does it say to you about a chief executive that is looking to remake the government and have it be loyal to him rather than the Constitution and the work of government?
I have read the article. It's deeply disturbing. I would say first, Jonathan, without reluctant to wade into a debate between two talented lawyers, Joyce and Neil, regarding Mr. Simpoloni's decision as to testify and his invocation of executive privilege. But I will say one thing we can all agree on is the testimony he did offer was deeply damaging to the president, and I think underscores so much of what we already know. And I think we can all agree that he should have testified much sooner. And certainly, I think he had an obligation to come out during the course of the impeachment trial a year and a half ago, as many other witnesses could have and unfortunately did not. With respect to the article that you mentioned, and I encourage every American to read it, I think it is deeply disturbing because it does provide an outline, as you said, to some of the former president's acolytes and what they'd like to accomplish if former President Trump were to run and win the presidency. the Schedule F that you mentioned is an issue that, in particular, a Virginia congressman, a colleague of mine, Jerry Connolly, has been working to try to convince the colleagues in the House and in the Senate to take up. But in effect, it would do precisely what you described. It would erode the civil service system that has been a hallmark of federal government service literally for the better part of 100 years, sort of eliminating the political patronage that used to exist within the federal government centuries ago. It is deeply disconcerting.
Katie, I'm going to end the conversation with you, since you cover the Justice Department. What signs are you looking for that will signal to you that the Justice Department is about to make a move, a more public move, on anything related to January 6th or Donald Trump?
So I think first I would take a step back and that term public move, keep in mind the only real public move that the Justice Department makes is when they indict somebody, when they return an indictment from a grand jury. Now, in terms of what we in the press look for as we create our stories, we're looking to see who the department is calling as a witness, who they're coming, asking to come in and just speak to the FBI, who they're putting in front of a grand jury, and when subpoenas go out and search warrants. Those are things that, sort of, obviously the Justice Department never publicly announces, but defense lawyers and witnesses, they often talk about these things. We have seen search warrants, and we have seen other sort of activity around Jeffrey Clark, the former Justice Department official, who, as you mentioned, wanted to be the Attorney General so that he could use the power of the Justice Department to help prevent Donald Trump's loss. So that's one thing that we're seeing, and that looks like a criminal investigation. We know that the Inspector General announced that soon after Joe Biden was confirmed, and that is an investigation that's been ongoing for a while. We're also seeing through the interviews, witness interviews, and subpoenas that have gone out, that the Justice Department is very interested in this idea that people close to Donald Trump, particularly several lawyers, including John Eastman, were trying to enact a plan to deliver alternate slates of electors that falsely say that swing states had voted for Donald Trump. These are the two things that we know the most about, and we know that the Justice Department is deeply interested in and is investigating. We do not yet know much more than that.
And with that, the key message I get from you, Katie, is DOJ is not asleep, not by a long shot. Katie Benner, Neil Katyal, Joyce Vance, Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse, thank you all very much.